So that's an interesting piece of artwork at the Fake News exhibition, and I'm here with the artist Jas Singh. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good, good. So tell us a little bit about how you came up with the concept of what you've got being projected onto the ceiling.
The live projection, yeah. Well, it sort of came about last year, really. It was I was quite ill. I was watching the news constantly. I was flicking channels. It was quite interesting when I was seeing the rolling news going from the BBC, Sky News, and RT News, and how different and conflicting they were with the news reports that they were saying. And then from that, I came up with the idea of just amalgamating more sort of cut and paste theory. Yeah. Reading a little bit about William Burroughs and this sort of Brian Geisen thing about when you do they did this experiment in the 50s when they do cut-ups. So he was cutting up old newspaper articles and then rearranging the text. And then once he did that, funnily enough, some of the stories actually became true in the future, and it was like, wow, it's like, did I actually create this? So it was sort of based on that a little bit. I was doing a bit of reading on Derrida about the deconstruction about text and words and how you can dissect them and they don't really mean much. So when I constructed a few of the newsreels just off the internet, just used YouTube, because it's obviously based on fake news and stuff. The large population, or what people believe with the algorithms, it was mainly YouTube and Google that sort of helped sort of, you know, persuade, let's say, the outcome in 2016, I think it was, the Trump year or something. And so I was like, well, just give it a go. So I kind of chopped them up all together, and then it was quite difficult for them to run as well, but it was quite interesting seeing what other countries is actually saying as well, based around places around the world, where the sort of rolling news thing was created. I think it was just after, well, when I say created, the original idea with the stock market and so forth on Wall Street, and then also I think it was after 9/11 when it was like we all wanted to know, well, what's next? What happened next? It's like X amount of people died. We really wanted to know who had done it and anyone coming out to say stuff. And then all the other news channels, which are owned by so many other companies, ended up adopting it. So for me, what I wanted to do was to kind of show that, in a sense, around the world, what the world have actually sort of, it's become, the rolling news has become a thing. So purposely, it's sort of, I've used news channels which YouTube sort of allow me to do a live broadcast. So this is a live broadcast. So whatever.
Yeah. So let me grab the iPad here, because if you can hold it, then
sure.
I'll just film here, because what I did is we just managed to get it. So put it on. I think where is it? So we've managed to film a little bit so people can see. This is actually using HTML coding. This page has been built with all of these ticker tapes here, so it's actually like a web page, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Which is then basically projected onto the ceiling.
Onto the fabric of the actual building, which, again, the architecture is power and politics as well. How things are done, and also it's sort of, you know, this kind of metropolis. This kind of, you know, the opening scenes of Blade Runner, all these kind of metropolis. A few other movies that you kind of see when you sort of see things disjointed. The other idea is the sweet spot, should I say, is when, as soon as you enter, but as soon as you walk into it with the noises, with the sound of 6 channels playing, and the more you walk in, the more abstract it becomes, and that is to also show, as we as viewers, we as the public, what actually happens while we're actually watching it as well. Nothing, you know, the fragmentation of what is real and what is unreal sort of begins from, I suppose, when humans began to think, in a sense, you know, and it's kind of based on sort of, based on those sort of things. There's also, you know, this other thing about unexceptional politics, which is this other thing about micropolitics and microcosm, you know, sort of how we all sort of create, let's say here, for example, the cultural quarter, so everyone's like-minded and thinking the way we all think, and that's that sort of representation again with the newsreels, where most of them are still, you know, after doing loads of research on the channels that I've chosen, they're all owned by the government, essentially. So wherever you go around the world, they're still controlled by the powers that be. So it's this kind of 1984 sort of George Orwell sort of idea, the Foucauldian panopticon idea, for sort of the prison. We're imprisoned, but we're sort of free in a sense.
So you go looking for different news sources, but in essence, they're all kind of regurgitating exactly the same information.
Exactly.
With their own slant or ideology, or
yeah. Well, it's like supporting a football team. So people go, oh no, I watch BBC News, or no, I watch Sky News. But in effect, they kind of, you know, in terms of politics, they're kind of creating that to feed us what they want us to know. And subconsciously, we do read it. I mean, I know people. There's a thing now where there's less of TV, where people watch TV. There's less of people watching TV, and it's more, news feeds on Twitter, on Facebook, I think mainly as well. And you know what, recent news interviews that I see from the public, and someone goes, oh well, the first thing I saw it on my Facebook feed. So, but who's then dictating the news to be on Facebook? So in a sense, whether we're using the TV as a tool or the internet as a tool, there's an algorithmic pattern which they're still forcing us to watch or to be influenced by. And again, the architectural idea, it's this kind of Corbusier, you know, all the well-known architects, you know, the way buildings are created are to keep people in control. The reason why, you know, the patterns of power, why there's a strip road goes across there, and why that's a no entry and that's an entry. They talk about traffic and so forth, but in a sense, there's still a form of control going on there. And the idea is, you know, when the sound's up louder, obviously we can't have it loud right now, but when it's louder, it's meant to be this bombardment and disorientation that we're actually getting from the actual piece in a sense.
Well, it's been quite interesting because I've been in here a couple of times now since the exhibition opened, and it's on for another week. But I've been walking around looking at each piece and sitting down and stuff, and then you forget the fact that noise is on in the background. Yeah. To the point where you then don't realise just how much of that noise there is when we're around, that sort of background noise or white noise that's going on. I think that's what's from my point of view. There's the visual part of it where it's, you know, so up on the ceiling and it's quite striking, and then you suddenly realise that it's live and there's all these feeds going along, but actually then it's the accompanying noise in the different languages as well. It's almost like watching the beginning of a Mission Impossible film, you know, where it's suddenly like, you know, all of these things from around the world, or they'll give you one of these things where suddenly something's going on somewhere and they're looking at all these different news feeds. I thought it was quite interesting because it made you think about it quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, the idea with the news, I mean, with the audio, you know, we do sort of drown things out, but then it's the same as in my defence as in the rolling news. There's less people actually listening to the news itself, what's going on, but half the time we'll read the rolling news bit, and it's like, oh right, that happens, oh that happened, and that's the thing, because it's on rotation. That's the only thing we sort of start to pick up on. I mean, there's a little blurb that I did. If I'll show you the little quick blurb that I did, if we walk around, I'll show you this blurb, which is basically. So this blurb here, you know, this story is inspired by actual events, certain characters, characterisation, incidents, locations, or dialogue, or fictionalised or composited for dramatic purposes. That's actually off Netflix. So before you're about to watch a documentary, or let's say sort of a movie, you know, like a 6-part series on Narcos or something like that. That's the thing that they sort of blurb up. But for me, you know, the idea of fan footage or live footage or things that exist that we all kind of get continuously bombarded with. For me, I've found that fitting with the actual the thing that I'm doing now. So I called it sabotage, where we're actually being sabotaged without realising how effective sabotage can kind of become in a subtle way, rather than a real sort of guarded up, you know, sort of army, you know, people taking over, you know. But yeah, it's that sort of thing.
Well, brilliant. Thanks very much for talking to us, Jas.
All right, cheers.